All right, what's up? What's happening? What's good? What it do, baby? You are tuned in to another edition of the Why Not Us, Why Not Now podcast. It's your boy Xavier, aka X, aka Zay, joined by my brother from another, Kory Blackshear. Y'all know him as KB. KB, it's been a busy week for us, bro.
Yeah, too busy, bro. A lot going on.
But I mean, anybody who's asked me this question, I'll simply say this. I'm busy for all the right reasons, and I'm very thankful for that because there were days where none of this stuff was possible, so I don't ever take it for granted.
So,
All right, man, we got to get into it. Of course, we're going to talk about what's happening up in Ann Arbor and the mess that's been created with Michigan in just a second. But there was a Thursday night football showdown that looked like it was going to end up being a sleeper, and then it turned into an exciting, thrilling game with a lot of bizarre twists and turns that happened. And that would be the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Atlanta Falcons. I know you probably don't care at this point, but the Falcons come out winning that one 29-28 because the Tampa Bay Buccaneers had an epic fourth quarter collapse. They were up 28 to 14 in the fourth quarter, but Bijan goes right down the field on the Falcons' next offensive drive, scores a rushing touchdown. Baker on the Bucks drive throws an interception. They tie it up on what was a controversial touchdown. Kyle Pitts, who had a night last night, 10 catches, a buck 52, three touchdowns. But that last touchdown was viewed as controversial because it was like, did he land in bounds? Was the elbow out of bounds? Just different things like that. Either way, the Bucks defense got completely shredded up throughout this game, but especially in that fourth quarter. They failed it on their next offensive possession, that being Tampa Bay. And KB, I pretty much knew, man, the Falcons are about to go down the field and they're going to end up winning this game. And we'll touch on the Tampa Bay angle here in just a moment, but I want to start first off with the victors in Atlanta. They were excited last night after getting that victory, but do you think that this may have helped secure some more security for Raheem Morris, or do you think that that's as good as gone?
yeah, no, I'm not going to go as far as saying that. I still think that Raheem does need to be fired because I think that we saw last week in the game against Seattle that they pretty much fell flat. They were flat. They didn't have any juice to their team. I think that he lost the locker room. Now, while I do feel like, last night's win was very impressive, I think this is more of an indictment on Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay has lost five of his last six. This is not good for a team that's trying to that pretty much had control of the NFC South early in the season. They are now a half game behind Carolina for that NFC South title, and with them having two head-to-head matchups coming up soon, I think that they need to reestablish what type of team they are. And I'm not really looking at like what the Falcons did as pretty much something to carry into next season because like we've had those moral victories before. We've had games last season where we thought they were going to build and come into this season with more more camaraderie, more juice, just more pop to their offense and defense. It doesn't translate all the time. So do I look at Raheem Morris like these last few games could salvage his job? No, I think that he needs to go. I think that there needs to be a new regime. I think that switching coaches this late into the season does little to no good because honestly, it's best to have a full offseason to evaluate the coach that you're looking for, and then you can go off of that. But right now, if someone were to say, like, if he lost last night's game, I saw a lot of people saying that he should be fired based off of last night's game. I didn't think so because what good would bringing in a new coach at this point be? I just don't really see it. I say that if you are going to keep Raheem Morris this long, let him finish out the season because there's really no point. You're already eliminated from playoff contention. You don't own your first round pick, which I honestly, the first round pick doesn't really mean too much to me anymore. Just seeing the play of James Pierce Jr., I feel okay with not having a first round pick because James Pierce Jr. has shown that he is a first round talent. So I look at the Falcons as you have too much talent on this team, and this shows me that you can compete with anyone, but a new regime is needed. Um, Zach Robinson, I think he needs to go. I still think that his play calling is very mundane. It's not exciting. It's not the type of offense, especially he doesn't cater the offense to the quarterback that he has. You have two pocket passers and you're running a pistol offense. You're running a lot of screens. These type of things I do feel like are, you know, you can look at the great moments that they had against Buffalo. You can look at the great moments that they had possibly even against Tampa Bay last night. But few moments don't erase the entire season. That's my whole point. You cannot look past the entire season based off of a few good moments. And I think that would be a mistake for the Falcons to retain this coaching staff just based off of a few good moments.
I understand completely where you're coming from with that, and I agree with you 100%. No, there's no point in firing him right now in the moment, but I do think that it's a good momentum booster what we saw last night for the team that will be returning next year, at least those players out there, because as much as we sit on this side and we say tank, 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 those professionals aren't being paid to tank, and they consider it an insult when you do tell them to tank, and I can definitely understand why. It's interesting to me that it took for Michael Penix Jr. to get injured for Bijan Robinson to start getting the football the way that he should have been getting it throughout the course of the season. Now, I do want to follow up with you on this one thing that you did say, though. You said you're not concerned about the first round pick at this moment. And I can understand why you would say that because Pierce has been really good this year in his rookie season. So is Jalen Walker, for that matter, too. It just hasn't flashed off the screen like Pierce has, but the numbers are there for him, too. Are you not concerned about the fact that you may not have the quarterback in the building though? Because here's the thing, we know that this team is very talented on paper. We know that they are talented all across the board. But if you don't have that quarterback, you're looking at another possible disappointing way in 2026 as well.
Now, I definitely get what you're coming from with the veteran. Like we do need to get a veteran quarterback in, and I look at next season's quarterback is going to be more of a bridge quarterback. It's not going to be somebody that's going to solve our problems long term, but we just need someone who's a consistent veteran who knows how to move the ball down the field, who can command the offense, who can learn the offense, because literally you're going to have one off season to learn.
So let me ask you this. Would you rather them take a flyer out, potentially on a trade for Kyler Murray, or a 1 to 2 year free agency deal on Mac Jones or someone like that?
Personally, I would rather Mac Jones. That's just me. Um, while I do feel like Kyler Murray, is a great quarterback, I would rather just take a flyer out on a, 1 to possibly 2 year deal with Mac Jones or someone like that than to facilitate a potential trade with Arizona to get Kyler Murray in the building. Excuse me. I think that Mac Jones has shown, that he can facilitate the offense pretty much in the absence of Brock Purdy this year. And they don't even have half of the weapons sometimes on offense as far as the wide receiver position in San Francisco. There was a lot of questions about who was their number one wide receiver coming into the season in San Francisco, and you still don't know. When I think of like their passing unit, I look at Christian McCaffrey and I look at George Kittle. I look at those two, and he has a similar situation. If he were to come to Atlanta, he would have a dominant running back in Bijan. If the Falcons choose to, bring Kyle Pitts back in the building, which I saw last night, that he has those flash in the pan moments where he shows this is what he was drafted for. He is a mismatch. He is a mismatch nightmare for a lot of corners, a lot of safeties, a lot of linebackers, because he has that speed. He has that, jump ball ability, but he has some of the similar things that he has in San Francisco he'll have in Atlanta. I think that it'd be foolish not to give him at least a look. And I think that it would be honestly more, of a team conscious decision to go look at like a free agent as opposed to trying to facilitate a trade where they may give up picks or other assets for Kyler Murray.
Now, we should also note that Michael Penix Jr. very well could be there at the start of next season, ready to go. It was a partially torn ACL, although the ACL has been injured before, but he very well could be ready to go at the start of preseason or the start of the regular season next year. And if he is ready to go, by all indications, I believe that he will be the starter. But at this point, I don't believe you can trust it based off of his health. And I felt that way when they drafted him to begin with anyway.
I did want to say one thing. Although Kirk Cousins to me has not looked the same like that he did last season for obvious reasons. Kirk Cousins at this stage in his career still is a better quarterback than Michael Penix. I think that the offense, if you've seen last night, do I think that Michael Penix could have done the same things? No, but it also has to do with the style of play that Michael Penix has. And we were talking about before his lack of mobility within the pocket. I think that with yet another ACL injury, he's going to even be more timid to move the pocket and to escape the pocket and potentially try to get first downs. He's going to even be more. So I look at the next quarterback of the Falcons has to be able to be a dual threat quarterback. I'm not saying that he has to be a Lamar Jackson or a Josh Allen type, but he has to be able to move the pocket. He has to be able to keep the defense guessing, because we've talked about this before. The day of the traditional pocket passer is slowly fading away. We aren't seeing as many traditional pocket passers anymore. And this is one of those things that where I feel like if you really understand, because if you looked at the game in San Francisco when we did play a Mac Jones also killed us on the ground with his legs. He was able to just escape the pocket and he was able to keep the chains moving enough for them to put that game away. I think that that is exactly what the Falcons need, no matter who the offensive coordinator, who the head coach is. Those are things that the Falcons need to be looking for going forward. And I do feel like it's too much has happened for me to trust Michael Penix now, because he wasn't impressive this season prior to the injury. Now coming off the injury, I cannot see a situation where I can just trust and give him the keys again, because, like I said, he's in his mid-20s. He's, you know, his rap, unfortunately, he's injury prone. That is what it is. He has a lot of, his footwork is questionable. His deep ball accuracy or lack thereof is questionable as well. So I think that all these questions are warranted, and I think that the Falcons need to seriously sit down this offseason and think about what they plan to do with him going forward as well.
It's no disrespect to Michael Penix Jr. with what either one of us are saying either, because we wanted him to be the one. But he just looks so uncomfortable in that pocket, and it just looked that way week after week after week. And when you see Kirk Cousins, and remember, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. His first 9 games as the Falcons starting quarterback, they went 6-3. Kirk Cousins was looking like a great quarterback during that run as well. He got injured during the latter half of last season, and that led to things being what they are. Last night they got back on track because they played the awful Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense, and we're going to touch on them in just a second. But you're 100% right. They do need to decide this offseason what they're going to end up doing with Michael Penix Jr. and if he can be the long-term option. And if Raheem is indeed fired, whoever the next coach is going to be, does he even want Penix to be his quarterback? Because one of the things about when these coaching hires happen like this is, and I don't know, maybe Terry Fontenot will get brought back as well. Maybe they'll let him go. I don't know. I think because of the uncertainty at the quarterback position and the fact that the Rams have that pick, and that pick is more than likely going to be in the top 10 for the Falcons, I think that they could view that as a fireable offense if they don't know if they have the right quarterback in the building, considering the fact that they drafted Michael Penix Jr. about a month and a half after they gave Kirk Cousins all of that money to come in and be the franchise quarterback for at least the next few years. So there are a lot of questions that are happening right there. But congratulations to the Falcons on their victory. Nonetheless, we'll see how they end up closing out the season. We'll see if they end up bringing Kyle Pitts back. Before we jump on Tampa Bay, I want to ask you this question, because I saw this a lot last night, and I've honestly wondered over the past few years, why weren't they doing this before? Do you see a world where maybe the Falcons should try to actually use Kyle Pitts more in the wide receiver slot as opposed to having him lined up at tight end, because he has great speed and he has great hands for the tight end? But I feel like part of where some of the shortcomings with him in his tenure in Atlanta has happened over the few years is because they didn't utilize him the best that he can. You've got a guy who is that big. Sometimes you need to line him up on the outside, and you said it already. He can get past those safeties. He can get past those corners. He is not a guy that you just match up with one-on-one. You have to double him. What do you think about that?
Yeah, like I mean, I'm all for that because we've seen in certain times where they've come out of certain formations where they'll split Kyle Pitts out wide, and if he's out wide by himself on the side by himself, he's more likely getting the ball. He cannot be guarded by most of the corners in this league. I think that we already established he's not a blocking tight end. That is not his game. Charlie Warner is the blocking tight end for the Falcons for a reason. Getting him off that line, letting him use that athleticism, because I do feel like he still is a unicorn. He is probably one of the most, if not the most talented tight end, just talent wise. We're not looking at if he's been productive. We're looking just at pure talent. He is one of the most talented tight ends in the entire league. But you also have to put him in positions to be successful. I think splitting him out wide, using him almost like a Brock Bowers type. Brock Bowers doesn't always line up on the line to get his targets. Brock Bowers is put in a lot of different positions. He's split out wide. He's on the line. He's brought in motion a lot of times to get him on some one-on-one type of matchups. I think that's how you have to use Kyle Pitts. You have to get him more opportunities in space to be able to work. Last night was just a small sample size of what he can be. I think that this is not like a one-off performance. I think that the talent's always been there. It's more about keeping him engaged, putting him in positions to succeed, and just getting him all of this within the flow of the offense. It has to flow together. Now, of course, with Drake London being out, this gives him more opportunity. But I still think that you have too much talent on that offense to not be able to get him the ball. He should be receiving upwards of 8 to 10 targets a game. That's how much I believe in him as a talent and how much I believe that he is a mismatch for a lot of corners, safeties, and linebackers in this league. You just have to put him in position to do these things, whether that's you know, whether that's splitting him out wide, like you said. But I think that the thing that I feel like Zach Robinson has failed in, he has not played to his, Kyle Pitts' strengths. Tight end screens, that's not his strengths. That's not him. He needs to be upfield, not tight end screens. That doesn't work for me. If I was, offensive coordinator of the Falcons, and this is just me saying this as, from a fan perspective, you got to get him in space. You got to get him in space. Let him work. Let him be that deep ball, that deep threat, or let him be that little intermediate threat that you need. When the game is tight, you need that 6'6" guy that you could throw the ball up to, tell him to go get it, and let's keep it rolling. You got one of the biggest wide receiver tight end duos with Drake London and Kyle Pitts. You got to utilize their strengths, not play to their weaknesses. So yeah, I'm 100% with you, X. I think that they definitely need to look at splitting him out wide, giving him more opportunities on the outside as opposed to playing him strictly on the line and giving him opportunities there.
And what I believe we also saw answered last night is a question we've been asking throughout the course of the season. Who is the Falcons' number 2 wide receiver? Well, if you utilize him correctly, it's Kyle Pitts. Remember, I kept saying for the past couple of months, I did not like how they had Michael Penix continuously force feeding the ball to only Drake London, where it's like defenses can easily figure out, okay, they're going to Drake on this one. Eventually, that's a game plan that's going to ruin you. So
Not to cut you off, X, but also, you are right in the fact that if you utilize correctly, it is Kyle Pitts. But also another person that I'm not noticing from last season being there, whatever happened to Kadero Hodge? Like I haven't seen him integrated at all into the offense, which I felt like, is he the best available talent? Maybe not, but I know he knows this offense, and I know that he could help this offense in certain ways instead of like David Sills. And there's no disrespect to David Sills, but Kadero Hodge, if we seen last season, he had his moments where he was very good in certain spots. So I just didn't understand why he wasn't available to be on the field. And at first I thought he was hurt, but then I was like, well, a little bit of controversy surrounding the fact that he even went on Instagram and publicly said, yeah, they forgot about me. Like they literally forgot about me. So That's one of the guys that's like a good little like wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 that could help you in the absence of your number one. Like I feel like they don't have outside of Drake London and Kyle Pitts, that wide receiver group. If you take Drake London off the field, is very weak. They are very weak. They are very prone to a lot of you know complementary football, but they don't have the pieces right now. I think on the outside to actually make a difference. So yeah,
But again, it doesn't surprise me that the Falcons had the offensive success they did in the air attack last night because they took on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and now it's time to talk about the losers of this game. They had a two-touchdown lead in this game. They lost this game. And KB, I sat in the quietest press box I've ever sat in my life last night at the culmination of that game last night. When they went up 28-14, Godwin gets the touchdown. Godwin gets the 2-point conversion off the passes from Baker Mayfield. I'm starting to write up my script for the show because, of course, I was there at the game to cover it last night. And as soon as I saw the Falcons go down the field, I'm like, okay, maybe I should stop writing. Then Baker throws the interception on the next drive. I'm like, yep, I'm done writing it. And I ended up having to tear up everything that I was writing and having to rewrite everything because that game ended up going in the opposite direction. We talked about Raheem Morris being on the hot seat if he needs to be fired. I can't tell you how much those questions are now lingering down here in the Tampa Bay and Southwest Florida area right now about Tide Bowls. And honestly, they're warranted because this man is known to be a defensive mastermind. And this defense has been a disaster for the better part of the last month and a half. The defensive line, they cannot stop anybody. Zion McCollum got injured in this game with a hip injury. But even before that happened, the cornerback, they were still shredding them. Kyle Pitts was already having a night on them before that injury happened. That definitely didn't help matters in any way whatsoever. That opened up the field more for guys like David Sills to be able to make key catches in the moments when the Falcons needed them. The Falcons late in the fourth quarter were staring at a 3rd and 28, and they somehow converted it. That is on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense all the way around. I don't know if guys are checked out. I don't know if there's a chemistry issue going on in the locker room, but that's not good in any way whatsoever. And you're not going to, it's not just some easy fix now at this point. I was saying that about a month ago because in the Tide Bowls era, the Bucks have this pattern of where somewhere in the midway point of the season, they might hit a little skid, but they usually can clean it up. They usually have about 6, 7 games to clean it up. They got 3 games left on the season, and they have to win all 3. And I'm not confident that they're going to be able to do it. Now, they go to Carolina next week. They go to Miami the week after that. They host Carolina in the season finale in Tampa Bay the first week of January to close things out. And I do believe that that will be for the NFC South title. The only reason I believe that could potentially be for the NFC South title is because, KB, with Carolina's strength of schedule that they have left, they've got the Saints on Sunday in New Orleans. Then they have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at home next week. They have Seattle coming into town after that, and then they have to travel to Carolina. I think that Seattle game could end up being a loss for them because the Seahawks are still potentially playing for the NFC West division, and they'll bring everything that they've got for that. With that being said, we already saw this Carolina Panthers team upset the team that many of us think is favored to represent the NFC in the Super Bowl, that being the Los Angeles Rams. So I don't know how correct that statement is that I just said about the Seahawks going in and beating Carolina. But when it comes to these Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and the thing that is so mind boggling about what happened last night is Baker Mayfield had everybody back. And I mean everybody. Mike Evans is back. Chris Godwin is back. Jalen McMillan is back. That is something that kind of came out of nowhere this week that Jalen McMillan would be available. If you'll remember, Jalen McMillan had a neck injury that he suffered back in August and week 2 of the preseason against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And honestly, I kind of had forgot that Jalen McMillan was supposed to be a part of this mix because of how Emeka Egbuka has splashed off the screen in his rookie season and because of the impact that guys like Tez Johnson have been able to have at times too. Baker had a loaded deck last night. Bucky Irvin is back. They've got their 3-horse running back tandem of Bucky Irvin, Rashad White, and Sean Tucker back. And they failed to give Bucky the ball when Bucky should have been given the ball. We've been talking all season about give Bijan the ball. They would not give Bucky the ball last night. And you've heard me talk about this for the past couple of weeks, KB. I don't think Josh Grizzard is the offensive coordinator that this team needs going forward. Is Todd Bowles the head coach for this team going forward? I don't know that either. If they end up losing this whole thing and they end up not making the playoffs after starting out the season 5-1, if he gets fired, it will not surprise me, despite the fact that he did get an extension before the start of this season. But he's not the only problem. I don't believe he'll ultimately end up getting fired if they can do something about the offensive coordinator spot. Look at the previous two offensive coordinators that Baker Mayfield had down here prior to Josh Grizzard. Dave Canales and then Liam Cohen. They are both head coaches in the league. Canales, the head coach of the Carolina Panthers, who are now the number one team in the NFC South Division. And Liam Cohen, they have completely changed that culture in Jacksonville this season. I came on here a couple of weeks ago and basically all but gave up on Trevor Lawrence. And ever since I did that, they've completely turned it around. He's completely turned it around. So now I feel like I have to do a 180 on that one too, to some degree. But Josh Grizzard was a guy that was in the building. They didn't hire outside of the building. That's usually not the best method to use. But things have completely gone off the rails in Tampa Bay. And I'm going to hand it off to you as I say this. Here's how I know things have gone completely off the rails. Todd Bowles went into his post-game press conference last night, and he dropped the F-bomb 7 times. He also dropped the S-bomb 7 times. Those are two of the 7 words that you are not allowed to say on television. And this is a man that many have given credit for basically being almost like a modern day Tony Dungy, right? He's calm, he's mild mannered, he doesn't lose his cool. That happened last night in the press conference. And he put the blame completely on the players. And I don't know if that was the right thing to do, but somebody's got to step up and it has to be better. I mean, what can you just say about this disastrous second half that we've seen from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers thus far?
Yeah, Eggs, you pretty much touched on it. And like I said, my lack of confidence in the Bucks mostly was deeply rooted in the fact that their defense couldn't stop anybody. I understood the injuries that they had on the offensive side of the ball, but I felt like they would get it together eventually once those pieces got integrated back into the offense. Now, 3rd and 28 was just that should be like the headliner for the second half of the season. It really honestly should, because you have a team who literally already been eliminated from the playoffs mathematically. There is no route for the Falcons to be in the playoffs. You give up 3rd and 28 when you're fighting for your playoff lives. That just lets me know there's a disconnect going on somewhere. I feel like that you were right to bring up the offensive coordinator position for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, because I have seen that being circulated a lot around the fact that how they looked with Liam Cohen last year, how they looked with Dave Canales. And it makes sense because like though he had Baker Mayfield playing at an all-pro level last year. Even at the beginning of this year, people had Baker Mayfield in some early MVP considerations. Those have fizzled out completely. You are now in a dogfight, and none of the games that you have remain on your schedule are any cakewalks, but it's mostly because of you, not because of the opponent. I feel like it's because of the way that you play. Now, I know McCullum got hurt last night, but like you said, they were getting shredded even before he was hurt. They have no type of the intensity that I'm expecting from a Todd Bowles led defense. I'm not seeing it. I see I see blood in the water for a lot of teams. I think they see a defense they can feast on in a number of different ways, whether that be on the ground, whether that be in the air, especially through the air. I think that Kirk Cousins, he was dialed in last night. Now, while he wasn't perfect, neither was that defense. I don't feel like that they turned the ball over. They now after they went up 14x, I think that they let their foot off the gas. I really think that they just completely lost that game more than the Falcons won. Now the Falcons had to execute, obviously, but I think that they lost that game. You saw Mike Evans frustrated on the sideline, and for good reason, because he balled out. He completely balled out. But let me ask you something. Has it been noticeable? Because I talked to another close friend of mine, Emeka Ibuka. This second half of the season been terrible. And I don't know if it's the fact that all of these weapons are coming back and, he's, kind of taking a back seat. I don't know if it's the fact that his involvement in the offense has dwindled a little bit more as far as his target shares. but he hasn't looked the same. And at one point in the season, at the beginning of the season, especially, I looked at him as one of those guys that, with Mike Evans and the whole, and the committee of guys like Chris Godwin, Jalen McMillan, all those guys gets back, it will open up more opportunities for him. But I just haven't seen it, and I look at that as an area of concern because outside of Mike Evans last night, they didn't get good contributions from guys like K. Otten, who had a great season last season. I didn't see that. Bucky Irvin didn't get the ball as much as he should have been. Go ahead, X.
So this is a layered question that I have to answer. Let me go to the Cade Otton point first before I touch on Emeka Ibuka, because I'm gonna throw a third scenario at you of what I think could be going on with that. If you notice in Josh Grizzard's offense, they don't utilize the tight ends very much as well. Devin Cope was one of those people that had a Baker Mayfield touchdown reception last night. KB, I had to look down at my roster sheet to see who number 82 on the roster was. And I
I
remember,
did
oh,
too.
that's Devin Cope from the preseason. They haven't utilized the tight ends very much in this offense being led by Josh Grizzard at all. When it comes down to Emeka Ibuka, could it also simply just be the case that this is a rookie wide receiver that teams finally now have the tape on that they now know how to game plan for? I think that could be a part of it as well.
And that very well could be the case. I just think that early in the season, he was getting so many opportunities and he was making the best of his opportunities. And lately, it's looked like he's kind of just been a guy instead of stepping up and being the guy in that offense. And you made a very good point about the difference between the offense is the offensive as far as like impact of the tight end this year compared to last year. K. Otten feasted last year. We saw it all. He was one of Baker Mayfield's top targets, and now with the new offensive coordinator this season, he's basically being asked to block more. He's basically being asked to not carry the same workload that he had last season, which is hard for a guy that talented. I think that if you look at it, the Bucks being losers of 5 of the last 6, they put themselves in a situation where honestly they deserve to miss the playoffs. And I'm gonna only say that because they had firm control of the NFC South. Like they had it. This was their division to lose. We came into the season. A lot of people said it was going to be a two-team race with the Falcons and the Bucks because of the additions that the Falcons made and because of the great drafting that the Bucks did at bringing in Buka. People thought that was going to be the two-team race. We saw that the Falcons fizzled out early. We saw that wasn't even really a case. But with the Bucks, you cannot you cannot have a lead like this in a bad division at that and squander it away this fast. And honestly, the reason why I say that they should lose this division is because it will be their own undoing the fact that they would lose this division. Now it still remains to be seen, but we have saw that they have no fluidity on offense. They have almost too many weapons. That may be a case as well. They may have too many weapons that they don't know what to do with them. And on defense, they're a train wreck. I have no confidence, even with them possibly hosting a home playoff game, that they would go up and beat Seattle. I have no confidence that they would even beat any of the NFC North teams that could represent. I don't even have any confidence that they could beat any of the NFC West teams that could possibly represent. So this looks to me like one of those situations. If they even were to get into the playoffs, it'd be a quick one and done situation. What do you think, X?
I mean, it very well could go like that. I mean, we saw it happen against Washington earlier this year in the wild card matchup that happened on Sunday Night Football. Man, I'm just having a real hard time wrapping my head around what I've been watching for the past month and a half or so. And also, I don't know if it's the injuries with the shoulder that happened out in LA or what, or maybe it's the play calling. I don't know. Baker has regressed. That's not the same Baker from a year ago. I don't know if it's Josh Grizzard's offense versus Liam Cohen's offense. I don't know if injuries are possibly playing a role in this and he's just toughing it out. But he doesn't look like the Baker Mayfield from a year ago. He looks closer to the Baker Mayfield from the first half of 2023. And that was when we still had questions about what is this team going to be able to do. And the last point I'm going to say on this before we jump on to the next topic, KB, it doesn't get better from here. It doesn't get better in terms of going into 2026 for this team. And the reason I say that is because we're now starting to enter into the era where you're more than likely going to end up losing your pillars like Levante David and Mike Evans to retirement after the end of next season. I don't see it happening this season, but at the end of next season, I could see those two walking off into the sunset together. And as somebody who has been around this team a lot for the past 2 years, I can tell you they are the heart and soul of that locker room. Yes, Baker Mayfield is the quarterback. He is QB1 and the fans love him. But Mike Evans was the last person to run out of that tunnel last night. And I knew that the roof was going to come off that place in that stadium last night when he came running out, as it indeed did. Levante David is usually the last person to run out on defense, no matter how great Vita Vea and some of these other guys can be. No, those guys are the heartbeat of this organization. And although this is the NFL, I'm going to relate it to MLB for a second, if I may. What happened to the Atlanta Braves when they started losing the heartbeats of their clubhouse and their locker room, like Freddie Freeman and Dansby Swanson and guys like that? It all started going downhill. Now, of course, we couldn't tell it immediately from the jump, but once you start losing guys like that, and of course, key position coaches like Ron Washington and Eric Young, it all just kind of went downhill. The culture of the locker room went downhill. And I'm starting to sense the same thing that could end up happening in Tampa Bay. What started in 2020 with the Tom Brady era, I think the window officially shuts after this year because those pillars, they're getting older. They're not the same players. But if you completely remove them from the locker room, which I think will be the reality at the end of the 2026 season, where do they go from there? Do they have guys in that locker room that can replace those guys, franchise icons like that, guys who mean so much to the community? I don't know if they have those guys in the locker room that can do that right now. It's so much more than just talent that goes into helping a team be what it is. Yes, having the most talented players gives you some form of an advantage, but if you don't have guys who are the heartbeat, who really make that thing go and can keep that culture together and keep those things locked in, you don't really have too much beyond that. And no matter how much talent you have, if you don't have those things that I just mentioned, you're probably not going to have too much more success. So I'm trying to hang in there with them, but I honestly think that we are starting to see a window get shut on this era of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yeah, for sure. Like you said, man. And like this was their year to really put a stamp on things, run away with the division, host a playoff game, possibly even get a top three seed in the NFC. And yeah, they've completely failed for that. I mean, with two of their next three on the road, I don't know if I have enough confidence to say that they can go in. I'm not even confident that they can beat the Dolphins at this point. Like the Dolphins have had a resurgence of late, and I'm not even 100% confident that they can go in and finish this season on a high note just because of the lack of, like you said, camaraderie that you look for in your leaders. Like if you saw the frustration of Mike Evans last night, that just goes to show that, he cares. He cares and he wants to win. Being at the top of that mountaintop and reaching it with Tom Brady, there's expectations that, you want to do it again and again. And with him being at a later stage in his career, you don't know how much time he has left. You don't know if you're even going to get the same Mike Evans. Like we saw that he could still play at a high level, but there's no guarantee that anything with all those lingering issues that he's had injury wise this year, there's no telling what you'll get in 2026. So, I mean, all of these things are, very big concerns for the Bucks going forward. So, like you said, X, I have no idea what direction this team is going in, but I do think that window has officially closed.
We want to get to some quick hitters here really quickly. Going back to the MLB, since we did briefly bring it up, the Atlanta Braves signing Robert Suarez to be the franchise's next closer. How do you feel about that move?
Love it, love it. And honestly, that was always the Braves thing. They needed to get their bullpen together. If they got their bullpen together and made a few moves, here and there, I'm still holding out hope. And I got my fingers crossed. If they can lure Kory Seager, that'll put the Braves right back in that title picture. I think that they are a few moves away, and I think that the Braves fans need to just be patient. Let's work. Let's figure out everything that our team needs. Let Double A figure everything out. And I don't think we're in as dire a situation as people believe. I think the talent is there. I think you have your leaders here. I think that we are set up to still be competitive going into next season. And honestly, I'm excited as a Braves fan that we were able to make that move. And I don't feel like it's over. I think that we still got a few more moves that we could make.
It also helps that one of your division rivals are also being tremendously weakened up right now because another closer from the NL East, he's now headed to the NL West. We say the rich get richer. The Los Angeles Dodgers signing Edwin Diaz from the New York Mets earlier this week. Although you don't like the fact that it's probably the Dodgers that end up getting him, gotta love the fact that the Mets are losing one of their guys right now. They are proving to continue to be a mess of an organization as we've always known them to be. But this helps LA out tremendously on the back end of that bullpen that we saw that was really troublesome throughout the playoffs.
Yeah, like you said, great move for the Dodgers. Honestly, this is going to hurt the Mets more than they even know because, like you said, they already weren't great in that area, and now they got considerably weaker by losing possibly one of the best closers in the game, and you lose him to the back-to-back World Series champs. Like it's just like throwing salt in the open wound, man. Like it got worse. It's one thing to lose him to someone in the division that would have hurt, but losing them to a team that's already loaded, like it just has to be looked at as the Mets being one of the poorest like run franchises. Like I don't care about the major free agent signings or anything. Like you have so many holes in your team, especially because you just lost Pete Alonso. And I know we probably were going to touch on that, but I had to just say you just lost Pete Alonso and Edwin Diaz. Like you are possibly going back. You're regressing, if anything. You're not doing anything to improve your team so far. So this is a bad look for the Mets, but a great move for the Dodgers.
And you gave a $765 million contract last offseason to a guy who can only hit a baseball. He doesn't pitch. He's not a great fielder. All he does is hit. That's all he does for you. And that's always hit and miss because guys go through slumps at any given time. But you brought up Pete Alonso. He is signing with the Baltimore Orioles. I knew he was as good as gone from the Mets as soon as their season ended, and he immediately announced he would be testing the free agent market. I didn't know where he was going, but I knew he wasn't coming back there.
Yeah, I didn't expect Baltimore to be a major player, but it makes sense now. And they actually got a pretty good loaded roster on offense themselves. Pairing him with Gunnar Henderson, I like that move for Baltimore. I did agree with what you said though. I did see him just as good as gone from New York. I think that pretty much ran its course. And once he said he was testing free agency, I knew it was over.
Guys who we thought were as good as gone in their profession, well, they're not exactly the case. So we know that the Indianapolis Colts situation at quarterback is in absolute shambles right now after losing Daniel Jones in week 14 to a torn Achilles tendon. We wish him all the best. He shouldn't have been out there to begin with anyway. He was playing on a broken fibula. Sometimes you have to save guys from themselves. And ironically enough, KB, it's been Indiana and Indianapolis this calendar year that's been dealing with this. Guys who have had lingering injuries, they decide to tough it out, play for the team, give themselves the best shot, and they end up losing. And, well, not losing, but they end up getting injured even more severely. Tyrese Halliburton being one of those. Caitlin Clark coming back before she should have came back from her groin injury that she was suffering. Ultimately ended up being season ending, and now you've got Daniel Jones. So to try to fix this situation, earlier this week, the Indianapolis Colts signed Philip Rivers at 44 years old to the practice squad, who has not played in the NFL for 5 seasons. Your thoughts?
I get it with the familiarity and with Shane Steichen and knowing the plays, but I think that we got to stop. We got to stop the nonsense, and the nonsense being that we can't hold certain things like criteria for certain players that have not played, and then make exceptions for other players. I love Philip Rivers. I think Philip Rivers was a great Hall of Fame quarterback. Now, that being said, he is 44 years old. He has not played in 5 years. I know Cam Newton touched on it that it was like a slap in the face to him. The problem I have is, are we only going to make exceptions for certain people that we like, or are we going to make it, or are we going to make this their criteria going forward? Because you cannot make an exception for bringing back a 44-year-old quarterback. Because if I'm going to bring anybody back, it's Tom Brady.
I want to add this point in before you continue. You brought up him being a great Hall of Fame quarterback in your opinion. He was on the ballot to possibly go in next year.
Yeah, and like I said, it like my issue is not with Philip Rivers. Like I think that he is just like a pawn in this whole thing. I think that my issue is when people say like certain quarterbacks deserve a chance, but certain other ones don't. What is it that we are using as the criteria for why they don't deserve these opportunities? Because is it a personal feeling? Is it because we don't want them to be a distraction? What is it? Now, I get it with Philip Rivers' respect. He knows the offense. That was more of the motivating factor, I feel like, that behind that. But let's not forget, he is 44. You're not going to, we can't glance over that like that's a small thing. I'm happy for that he's getting another opportunity and that he wants to play. But we cannot keep doing this for guys saying, well, this one deserves it, but this one doesn't. One, like when both hasn't played in the NFL in a significant amount of time. Now, what Cam Newton was saying was it was a slap in the face. Not even the fact that he didn't get an opportunity, but the fact that you got a guy who's 8 years older than him, who you don't know what he's going to look like. You got a guy that's 8 years older than Cam Newton, who, I'm not advocating for Cam because Cam did not look good towards his final few games in the NFL. I'm not advocating for Cam. I'm just saying let's be consistent. If we're going to be consistent and say we're going to hold guys to a standard, let's hold guys to a standard. Let's say that, like, if you got guys, because there are plenty of guys that are waiting on their opportunity and don't get that opportunity, and you call up a guy who is 44 years old, he's closer to getting his pension than he is to what I'm saying, being a high level starting quarterback in this league. Like whether that is, your comfortability or familiarity with the offense, whatever it is, you have to just be consistent with what you're, holding guys to if you're going to bring in another quarterback. I know this was out of desperation, X, so I'm not going to, try to go too much in on Philip Rivers because, like I said, this is not about Philip Rivers. It's just about what Philip Rivers represents as far as being an older quarterback who has been retired for 5 years, coming back into the fold after not playing. And you have guys that are out there who are looking for a job, who have been staying in shape, doing the things that they've been doing and not getting that opportunity. I think that's just kind of like a bad look to me.
Well, I brought up the Hall of Fame point and him being on the ballot because I wanted to honestly resonate with people that that's how long it's been since we saw him on an NFL field. He was on the Hall of Fame ballot to go in for next year. Now, by him being signed by this team for the practice squad, I don't know how that works out now. I don't know if he does take, obviously, if he does take the field this season, that scratch and that goes out of the window, and you have to wait another 5 years for that again at that point. But I don't think he was going to be a first ballot guy anyway, considering the guys that we saw on that ballot for this year. I mean, Drew Brees, Larry Fitzgerald, my goodness. But I'm with you 100%. And hey, listen, I'm just like, if you've gone a certain amount of time without doing this, I'm not necessarily looking your way anyway, whether you know the offense or not, because I know I'm not going to end up getting what it is that I'm used to you being able to provide. And I honestly might hurt my team more than I'm going to help it. The Colts, like you said, it's desperation mode. Their season is also going off the rails. That us Gardner trade is starting to look like a disaster with all those picks that they gave up now. Because even prior to Daniel Jones's injury, he had started to regress a little too. So we'll see what ends up happening with that. Closing out the quick hitters with this one. Last week, LeBron James's double-digit point streak came to an end at 1,297 games, and he had 8 points against the Toronto Raptors. Folks are saying that he sacrificed that streak at the end of the game by giving up the assist that led to the game-winning three by Rui Hachimura. I don't like to look at it like that. He was playing terrible in that game. if you honestly go back and look at it. And I honestly was questioning KB at the end of the game, is this the end? Not because of the point streak coming to an end. I watched that game. LeBron's movements looked awful. He looked 2 steps slower out there. His shots were getting blocked. Like it looked bad out there. But he's came back since then and he's had 2 stronger performances. The 29-point game against Philadelphia, the 19-point game against the San Antonio Spurs just a few nights ago back home in LA. But I look at the end of this streak truly as like the end of an era. We got something else that's happening on Saturday as well that's really like the end of an era to our childhood, and that is the final WWE and wrestling match of John Cena's Hall of Fame wrestling career. And I just look at LeBron's streak coming to an end. We know that that's going to be coming to an end. When whatever ends up happening with Chris Paul, he's already announced that this is going to be his last season. How much longer is Aaron Rodgers going to continue to hang in there? These are guys who helped make up the development of a lot of our sports conversations that we had when we were teenagers at Newton High School. And it's like we're watching all of that come to an end. And it's just like all I got to say to that is, damn, man, we getting old.
Yeah, I mean that just shows the level that these guys been playing at for such a long time. The longevity, you have to speak volumes to that because, like you said, Aaron Rodgers, Chris Paul, LeBron James, these guys represent a part of our lives. Like we can't tell our life story, especially with sports, without mentioning guys like that because they represented such a significant part of our lives. Like we grew up watching these guys.
Don't leave my guy John Cena out of that either. I know we don't talk about wrestling on this podcast,
Hey,
but don't leave John out of that.
I apologize, man. John Cena, man. Tomorrow's gonna be such a sad moment for me because I grew up watching wrestling in the early 2000s, and when he burst onto the scene, man, I remember everybody wanted those spinner belts. Everybody wanted one. Everybody, wanted. Everybody was doing the "you can't see me" wave. So yeah, tomorrow's gonna be a very end of an era, end of a chapter for him. I commend him because, like I said, he got so many kids interested in wrestling. He has so many young adults interested in wrestling. Like you're gonna see the amount of guys that are in their 30s, 40s that can't speak on their wrestling story without John Cena as well. Like this is one of those things that it just shows that how long these guys been doing it. Like I gotta speak to how impressive it is. And for those that are saying like, "Oh man, it's just wrestling," it is not just wrestling. It's nostalgia. Like it represents an era in your life that you probably had your most joy. Everything was everything. Like imagine us watching a Royal Rumble in 2006. I can't tell you the feeling that I had at that moment, but it was nothing like coming home, being able to ask your mom, "Can we order this pay-per-view?" and being able to just watch your favorite wrestlers. Like that was like a moment of significance for me. And so now that we're starting to see that our legends are getting old, man. We're getting old, and it just shows that we have to get ready to bring in the new eras. Like new eras are approaching, and it's time to not necessarily say goodbye, but basically close some chapters and get ready for some new ones, some new stories to be written. And that goes along sports and sports entertainment. But yeah, shout out to John Cena. Wish him luck in his future endeavors. And I know I will be watching tomorrow. I have to just as a fan, as a fan of his for pretty much 20 years. I gotta watch. I got to.
Also, should be noted that there are reports lingering that Brock Lesnar's final match in WWE could happen in 2026 too. So that just goes to show another legend who could be retiring too. But how people in the 80s felt about Hulk Hogan, how people in the 90s felt about Stone Cold, The Rock, Shawn Michaels. That's how kids who grew up in our era, that's how we feel about guys like John Cena. And I'll be watching right there too. Just, man, like it's hard to believe that this is the point that we've reached. But whenever it's Aaron Rodgers' last game, LeBron's last game, CP3's last game, this is truly the end of an era. And it's like, I don't know how folks who were once our age and are now older than us feel about this. As you're ushering out an era like this, it's like it almost feels like it's uncomfortable as you get ready to go into this new era of whatever this new era is going to be. And maybe it's because of the uncertainty with it, because as much as we say that the game is in great hands, especially when it comes to the NBA, we don't know who is going to emerge in that spot once LeBron leaves. We want it to be Ant-Man. We and I'm speaking from the American player standpoint, the domestic player standpoint. We don't know who that guy is going to end up being. So salute to LeBron James, salute to John Cena. I'm not going to crap over LeBron James only having 8 points in a game last week. The fact that for 1,297 consecutive games, the last time he had not had double digit points was January 5th, 2007, prior to last week when he had those 8 points in a regular season game. January 5th, 2007, I was in the fifth grade. I'm about to be 30 years old in about 6 months. That just goes to tell you how long this greatness has been going on. But we'll wrap up the quick hitters really quickly. Also, just by going to the college football playoff, if we may, we're going to make this quick. Alabama and Miami get in. Texas and Notre Dame are out. James Madison and Tulane get in as the 11 and 12 seeds. I understand people that have gripes with this, KB, but I'm simply just going to say this. If they planned on putting two of those Group 5 teams into the playoff, and they narrowed down that 10 seed between Miami and Notre Dame, how they did, I have no problem with what the committee did in that selection, because Miami did win the head-to-head matchup. They both did go in with 10 and 2 records. Now, if James Madison and Tulane were simply put in just simply as a feel-good story, okay, I can understand the gripes that people have with that at this point, because now at this point, we're not getting the best 12 teams in the nation. But I can guarantee you, and you've heard me say this before, that college football playoff was expanded to 12 teams to give teams like James Madison and Tulane a shot to get in. And when they come in and they have the records they do, despite whatever you think about their competition, despite of the fact that Tulane played Ole Miss earlier this season and they got the doors blew off them, despite what you think, that expansion happened to at least give them a shot to get in, and they got in. So I can't be mad at that. But if that's what that 10 seed was based around, I'm sorry, Notre Dame. The committee made the right decision.
I think my biggest gripe I felt like that we need to do away with the automatic bids. The automatic bids do not work because let's just say, for example, Miami was not the champion of the ACC, yet they were able to get in. And this is my problem because next year, if we were going off the fact that the automatic bids have to happen, Duke would have been representing the ACC. That is the exact thing that will happen with a losing record. Duke would have been in the playoff, so we're not getting in the best 12. My problem is the criteria seems to be moving goalposts because yes, the teams that I feel like have the most controversy around them are James Madison, Tulane, Alabama, Miami. Alabama being a team with 3 losses, they're in. 1 loss coming to Georgia, 1 loss coming to Florida State, and 1 loss coming to I'm sorry, what was the team that Alabama lost to again? That third
Oklahoma.
team? Oklahoma. And it looks like that's who they'll be matching up with in the first round of the playoffs. I don't really like it because if your criteria is we're going to have the best 12, you're not seeing the best 12 teams play, because I really felt like that a lot of teams had had a claim. Now, here's why I don't need Notre Dame had a claim. What was your most impressive win this year? USC? What can you really hang your hat on? Because your strength of schedule was not good. You're in a conference in basketball, but you're not in a conference in football. I'm not understanding, what do you expect them to do? You don't have a strength of schedule. Your strength of schedule sucks when it compares to a team like Georgia. If we're measuring you up against your counterparts of who should get in and who shouldn't get in. And they were saying, I know their argument was a lot of this was happening early in the season. Does not matter. It does not matter when you look at everything because of the fact that you did not take care of your business and now you wanted to hopefully get bailed out with a playoff spot. So I have no problem there. Look at me when I say this, though. Alabama? No, no, no. I am not giving Alabama a playoff spot. If anything, they would be the first team out. But I am so good on the automatic bids. I do not agree with the automatic bids. And I'm gonna tell you something else, X. I got stopped by an older gentleman, and I believe Chick-fil-A the other day. And me and him had a discussion about this playoff bracket. And we both agreed bring back BCS because the BCS era was the only one I felt like that made sense. You cannot argue about not being in the playoff bracket or possibly playing for a national championship if you did not take care of your business in the regular season. The regular season has to matter at some point. We cannot keep rewarding teams based off of automatic bids. This ain't basketball. I don't understand what the automatic bid came into play anyways, why it came into play. This ain't basketball. We should not be rewarding teams just solely based off the fact that if they beat someone, because honestly, when you're playing these conference championship games, there's no real benefit to some of these games for certain teams. There's no benefit. There's only consequence for losing, but there's no benefit. Yeah, you can say that you're the conference champion, but if you lose, you could completely knock yourself out of the playoff picture completely. We saw that with BYU. They got blitzed against Texas Tech. They're out. They are completely out. They have 2 head-to-head losses against Texas Tech this year. They're out. So you got to feel for a team like that. You lost to the number 3 seed twice, and you're looking on the outside. You're on the outside looking in, and you have a team like Alabama that lost to 2 playoff teams and one team that has no business anywhere. So it just seems like that the BCS era was the only era of football that I can look at and say it makes sense. This is the only one that I can say, like, okay, you shouldn't have a gripe. These 2 teams are undefeated. You're not. Or they have the best loss out of everyone in the field. And that this is the best football that we're going to see. We want to see the best. We don't want to see another Georgia versus Washington game. Not Georgia versus Washington, Georgia versus TCU. We don't want to see another national championship like that. I know I don't. As a fan, I don't want to see that. If anything, I want to see the best play against the best. And no disrespect to Tulane and James Madison, I'm not sure if we're going to get a competitive game. This isn't the same as like March Madness in basketball where you're getting a 1-game sample size and that, anything can happen. The talent disparities between these teams in college football are a little bit different. So I don't know if we're going to see the best play against the best. And I have so many questions as some of these teams being included in this playoff bracket. So yeah, I would bring back the BCS era. If I were, I think that this run of the college football playoff 12-team bracket is been a disaster because every year we've seen that there's been cases being made against certain teams being in and certain teams being left out. So I would bring it back.
I mean, you make a good argument for it. I'm all for bringing the BCS back. I also am probably in the minority on this. I didn't have a problem with the 14 playoff rank. I didn't like the Georgia TCU thing, but I didn't have a problem with the 14 playoff rankings because here's the thing that this 12-team playoff has done in the past 2 years. We're not seeing the greatness in college football that we used to see. There's leeway. There's leeway for, I know I can lose 2, possibly 3 games and still have a chance to play for a national championship. And we're not seeing the greatness on display that we used to see week in and week out for years. So I can definitely understand where you're coming from with that. This is going to tie a bow on part 1 of the Why Not Us, Why Not Now podcast. We told you we got to talk about the mess that's going on in Ann Arbor, and we're going to address that in part 2. X and KB coming at you. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.